Rome, 64 AD. The most powerful city in the world is in flames. Entire districts turn to ash within hours. Families lose everything in a single night. And while the people weep in the streets, the emperor orders the construction of a palace with a private lake with walls of gold in the middle of the ruins. What happened next is one of the most disturbing, brilliant, and blood-soaked stories Rome has ever produced, and it begins right here. What most people don't know, and what school textbooks have never had the courage to explain this clearly, is that the Colosseum was born out of an act of political revenge. It was not built out of love for the people. It was built to erase the memory of a tyrant and place a new dynasty in power. Every stone of that amphitheater carries intent. Every arch was raised with cold calculation, and beneath all that architectural grandeur lies a machine of social control so sophisticated that even today, without most people realizing it, we are still living within versions of it. In this video, you will discover how a fire destroyed Rome and gave rise to the greatest amphitheater in history. You will understand why the Colosseum was far more than entertainment. It was a political weapon disguised as spectacle. You will explore the Hypogeum, the underground system of special effects that would leave any Hollywood director speechless, and you will see why a structure that should have turned to dust centuries ago is still standing and still has things to say. If you've made it this far, you're not an ordinary viewer. You are part of a legion that refuses to let the history of Rome die. But most people who watch this channel still aren't subscribed. If this story gave you something, you already know what to do. Click the red button below, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the more this legion grows, the deeper we can go into the dark, forgotten stories that no one else has the courage to tell. Now lean back. Rome is about to speak. Rome, in the year 64 AD, awoke covered in ashes. The fire that devastated the city was not merely an urban tragedy, it was the spark of one of the greatest political turning points in ancient history. Nero, an emperor already known for his eccentricity and cruelty, saw his reputation collapse along with the city's rooftops. And what did he do in the face of such destruction? He built a palace. The Domus Aurea, literally the Golden House, was a monumental complex that spread across what had once been entire neighborhoods, complete with an artificial lake at its center and walls plated with gold. The contrast was unbearable for the Roman people. While entire families lived in the streets without shelter or hope, Nero wandered through perfumed halls and feasted in rotating dining rooms. This disconnect between ruler and ruled was not merely moral, it was dangerous. Rome was a city of nearly 1 million inhabitants, with an explosive capacity for revolt that any minimally intelligent emperor should have respected. Nero clearly did not. It was in this landscape of ruins and resentment that Vespasian rose to power in 69 AD, following the so-called Year of the Four Emperors, a chaotic period in which Rome saw 4 different men attempt to claim the throne in less than 1 month. Vespasian was a pragmatic general, the son of a modest family, and he understood something Nero never did. Power in Rome was not only military, it was symbolic. To rule the most powerful city in the world, it was not enough to win over generals, it was necessary to win over the streets. The decision to build a great amphitheater on the site of Nero's private lake was therefore far more than an engineering project. It was a public declaration, visible to all, that the space that had been taken was being returned. It was politics transformed into architecture, popular resentment turned into a governing strategy. And there, where the arrogance of an emperor had once held water for his personal pleasure, something would rise that would define Rome forever. A structure that millennia later still makes us stop and ask, how was it possible? And if the fire was the spark, politics was the fuel that transformed those ashes into one of the greatest monuments in human history. Vespasian was not a man of half measures, and neither was the Colosseum. When the construction began in 72 AD, every detail of the project carried a carefully calculated political message. The choice of location, the monumental scale of the structure, the free access granted to the public, none of it was accidental. It was mass communication before mass media even existed. The emperor understood that in a city like Rome, architecture spoke louder than any speech. The Flavian dynasty, founded by Vespasian and continued by his sons Titus and Domitian, needed legitimacy, and in Rome, legitimacy was built through grand, visible gestures. The amphitheater was exactly that, a concrete symbol that the new regime had ended the era of a tyrant and inaugurated the era of the people. Every arch raised was a response to the Domus Aurea. Every seat made freely available was a direct challenge to Nero's memory. The message was simple and powerful. This space is yours. What makes this move even more fascinating is realizing that this strategy hasn't aged, it has only changed form. Governments around the world throughout history have used large public works to construct narratives of power and generosity. In Brazil, the construction of Brasilia under Juscelino Kubitschek carried that same DNA, a monumental project as the symbol of a new era. In the United States, Roosevelt's New Deal turned public works into propaganda of hope. The Colosseum was perhaps the earliest and most successful example of this playbook. And the Roman people bought into that narrative because it was real enough to be believed. The amphitheater was not just a promise, it was a tangible, visible delivery. Any citizen could enter, sit, and feel that Rome belonged to them. That sense of belonging was exactly the fuel Vespasian needed to consolidate his rule. And while the stands were being filled, something even more extraordinary was rising, a feat of engineering that would challenge not only time, but the very limits of what seemed possible. And if the Colosseum was a political weapon, engineering was the ammunition that made it immortal. Building the Colosseum in the 1st century AD was the equivalent of launching a rocket into space without computers. The Romans had no modern machinery, no digital calculations, no hydraulic cranes, and yet they raised a structure 50 meters high, capable of holding up to 70,000 people in just 8 years. The secret lay in a brilliant combination of materials: travertine from Tivoli for the outer structure, volcanic tuff for the inner walls, and Roman concrete bricks, a mixture so durable that it still resists deterioration to this day. The system of interconnected arches and vaults was the technical heart of the structure. Instead of a massive and heavy build, the Romans distributed weight intelligently, creating a kind of architectural skeleton capable of supporting enormous loads without overburdening any single point. It's the same principle modern engineers use in bridges and viaducts, except the Romans arrived at it 2,000 years earlier. To grasp the scale of the project, it's estimated that around 100,000 cubic meters of travertine were used, transported along roads built specifically for the construction. Thousands of workers, slaves captured in the Jewish wars, skilled craftsmen, and military engineers operated in continuous shifts in a logistical system that rivals major contemporary projects. The structure was modular, meaning different teams could work simultaneously on separate sections, accelerating progress without compromising quality. This method of parallel construction is exactly what modern engineering firms use in large-scale projects, and the Romans had already mastered it in the 1st century. The result was a structure that survived earthquakes, looting, centuries of abandonment, and even the deliberate removal of its own materials. Even reduced to 2/3 of its original form, the Colosseum still commands respect and awe from anyone who sees it for the first time. And all of that structural grandeur served a very specific purpose: to host the greatest spectacle the ancient world had ever seen. Because when the gates finally opened, Rome stood still, and what happened within those walls would change the history of entertainment forever. And when the gates of the Colosseum finally opened, Rome was no longer just a city, it was a volcano. The year was AD 80, and Emperor Titus, son of Vespasian, presided over what would become the most anticipated event in Roman history. The inaugural games lasted around 100 consecutive days, 100 days of uninterrupted spectacle, with free entry for all citizens. Up to 70,000 people filled the stands daily, organized by social class: senators in the front rows, plebeians in the upper tiers, women in separate sections at the very top. It was an entire city gathered within another city, vibrating in unison. But what made that experience truly overwhelming was not just the number of people, it was the total sensory immersion of the spectacle. There was live music performed during the combats. Perfumes and essences were sprayed throughout the arena to mask the smell of blood and animals, and massive awnings called the Valerium were extended by sailors of the Imperial fleet to shield the audience from the sun. Imagine the scene: tens of thousands of people under a carefully engineered shade, watching lions and gladiators in combat, with the sound of trumpets echoing through the stands. It was not entertainment, it was total immersion. The Roman people did not passively watch these games, they emotionally participated in every second. The crowd shouted, gestured, gambled, cried, and celebrated as if each fight were an extension of their own lives. There was a visceral connection between the spectator and what unfolded in the arena, something any football fan who has ever been in a packed stadium can instinctively understand. The difference was that here the consequences were real, the blood was real, and the line between entertainment and power was deliberately erased. Titus had given the Roman people not just an amphitheater, he had delivered an experience that defined identity, reinforced belonging, and celebrated Rome's power before the world. Every spectator left with the feeling of having been part of something greater than themselves, and that feeling was carefully engineered, because beneath all that spectacle and emotion, there was a machine, literally, operating beneath the arena, orchestrating every surprise, every appearance, every moment of pure astonishment the audience could never have anticipated. And beneath all the emotion that swept through the stands, there was a world the audience never saw but always felt. The Hypogeum was, in essence, the backstage of the greatest show of antiquity. A network of underground corridors stretching beneath the entire arena, divided into chambers, cages, ramps, and mechanisms that operated with remarkable precision for the time. Down there, while the crowd roared above, hundreds of workers, guards, and handlers moved in near total silence, coordinating the invisible chaos that made the spectacle above seem almost magical. It was like watching a master illusionist without ever seeing the trick behind the sleeve. The underground cages housed exotic animals brought from every corner of the empire: lions from Africa, bears from Germania, tigers from Asia, hippopotamuses from Egypt. These animals were kept in darkness, often deprived of food for days, so they would emerge into the arena in a state of maximum agitation. When the trapdoors opened and lifting platforms raised them to the surface, the effect on the audience was one of pure astonishment, as if the earth itself had given birth to those creatures. It was theater, it was illusion, it was engineering in the service of emotion. But the Hypogeum was not just for animals. Entire sets, artificial forests, rocks, decorative structures were assembled underground and lifted into the arena within minutes, completely transforming the environment between events. Gladiators waited in designated chambers, separated by category and type of combat, guided through different routes so they would never encounter each other before the precisely calculated moment. It was a level of production logistics that any modern film director would recognize with admiration and perhaps even envy. What the Hypogeum reveals above all is that the Romans understood something profound about human behavior. Surprise is one of the most powerful emotions that exist. Creating the unexpected, the inexplicable, the seemingly impossible, this held the audience with a force no predictable spectacle could ever achieve. And all of this invisible machinery served something far greater than entertainment, because what took place inside the Colosseum was not merely amusement, it was a sophisticated instrument of control, power, and dominance over the mind of an entire people. And just as the Hypogeum was the invisible machinery of the spectacle, the program of the games was the invisible script of power. The events in the Colosseum followed a deliberate sequence, crafted with the precision of those who deeply understood the psychology of crowds. The morning was reserved for the venetanes, hunts featuring exotic animals, serving as a warm-up for the audience, a lighter introduction before the main course. In the afternoon came the public executions, often staged as dramatic reenactments based on Roman myths and legends. Condemned individuals were forced to play mythological roles until death, in a macabre theater that blended culture and cruelty with unsettling ease. And at the end of the day, the climax, gladiatorial combat, the moment the entire city had been waiting for. But behind this carefully structured program lay an intention that went far beyond entertainment. The Roman concept of panem and circenses, bread and circuses, was an explicit and conscious state policy. Keeping the population fed and entertained was the formula to prevent uprisings, suppress discontent, and divert attention from the empire's structural problems. The Roman historian Juvenal, who coined the expression, was already openly criticizing this manipulation in the 1st century, and his criticism remains strikingly relevant. Only one needs to look at any modern society that uses mass entertainment as a release valve for deep social tensions. Within this context, the gladiator was more than just a fighter. He was a living political symbol. When the emperor extended his thumb up or down before thousands of witnesses, he was not merely deciding a man's fate, he was demonstrating in the most visceral and unmistakable way that he held absolute power over life and death. Every execution, every fight, every animal slain in the arena reinforced the same message: Rome is invincible, and its emperor is its god. It was propaganda in its rawest form, unfiltered and unapologetic. What makes this strategy even more sophisticated is that it operated at multiple levels at once. While it distracted the poor, it also entertained the rich. While it displayed power to Roman citizens, it intimidated conquered peoples brought in as slaves or gladiators. The Colosseum was at the same time a circus, a courtroom, a temple, and a political stage, all wrapped into an experience the people loved and demanded more of. And this delicate balance between pleasure and control worked for centuries, until the very empire that sustained it began to crack from within. And just as Rome built the Colosseum with the strength of an empire at its peak, it was the weakness of that very empire that began to devour it from within. The decline of the Colosseum didn't happen all at once. It was slow, gradual, and painful, like everything surrounding the fall of the Western Roman Empire. As central power weakened throughout the 5th century, the games were progressively abandoned. Without the resources to sustain the monumental logistics the spectacles required, without emperors powerful enough to fund the propaganda, and with the rise of Christianity questioning the morality of such combats, the Colosseum fell silent. The stands that once roared with 70,000 voices grew empty, and the silence that took over that space was deafening in its own way. What followed was a transformation few imagine when looking at the ruins today. During the Middle Ages, the Colosseum was occupied by noble families who turned it into a private fortress. Its thick walls and elevated structure made it ideal for defense in times of urban conflict. Then came the poor, who found shelter in its underground corridors and within the gaps of the structure. The arena that once hosted African lions and gladiators now housed entire families living among the stones. It was a brutal irony. The ultimate symbol of Roman power became a medieval tenement. But the most devastating blow didn't come from wars or abandonment. It came from the church's own building ambitions. For centuries, the travertine and marble of the Colosseum were systematically removed to construct churches and palaces across Rome. It's estimated that 2/3 of the original material was stripped away and reused in other projects, including, according to historians, parts of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. The greatest amphitheater in history was literally dismantled stone by stone to build the heart of Western Christianity. If that is not a historical twist worthy of a screenplay, nothing is. The earthquake of 1349 was the final major blow. Entire sections of the southern side collapsed, and what remained was
And it is precisely in the darkest moments that great stories reveal what they are made of, and the Colosseum would be no different. The turning point began in the 18th century, when the Western world turned its gaze back to antiquity with a mixture of nostalgia and reverence. The Colosseum, which for centuries had been treated as a quarry and shelter, took on a new meaning, this time a spiritual one. The Catholic Church began to associate the amphitheater with the martyrdom of persecuted Christians, and popes such as Benedict XIV declared the site sacred, prohibiting the removal of any further materials. It was a late salvation, but a salvation nonetheless. The fallen giant was finally being respected. With the rise of Italian nationalism in the 19th century and the unification of the country, the Colosseum assumed yet another role in its long list of meanings, a symbol of Italian greatness, a bridge between the present and the glorious past of Rome. Restoration efforts began, archaeological studies deepened, and the monument came to be treated as part of humanity's shared heritage. Today, it receives around 7 million visitors per year, making it one of the most visited landmarks on the planet, surpassed by only a handful of sites worldwide. From a medieval quarry to the pinnacle of global tourism, few narrative arcs in history are as striking as this one. But the Colosseum's true legacy is not found in visitor numbers or in the photographs that flood social media every day. It lies in what it represents when you stop, look at those 2,000-year-old walls, and realize you are standing before something that has survived emperors, religions, wars, earthquakes, and centuries of abandonment. It is at once a monument to human genius and a mirror of our capacity for cruelty. It was built to glorify power and ended up outlasting every power that ever passed through it. That alone is a lesson no textbook can fully teach. The Colosseum is not just a ruin. It is a conversation that Rome is still having with us 2,000 years later. Every stone that remains carries a layer of history, the ambition of Vespasian, the blood of gladiators, the laughter and cries of 70,000 spectators, the silence of abandonment, the faith that saved it, and the curiosity that revived it. It reminds us that civilizations fade, empires fall, but the works that touch something deep within the human spirit, whether made of stone, paper, or pixels, endure. And the story you've just encountered is the most concrete proof of that. So, after all of this, can you still look at a photo of the Colosseum and see nothing more than a beautiful ruin? Because if the answer is yes, then you weren't paying attention. What you've just encountered is not merely the story of a building, it's the story of how power works, how crowds are manipulated, how human genius and human cruelty walk side by side with an intimacy that is deeply unsettling. Now think about this. If the Romans, 2,000 years ago, had already mastered the art of controlling narratives, building symbols, and using entertainment as a political instrument, what does that say about the world you live in today? What are the modern Colosseums? What are the bread and circuses of the 21st century? That is a question worth asking out loud, and one that only those who understand history can answer honestly. Rome was not built in a day, and it was not destroyed in a day either. It was constructed brick by brick, decision by decision, and dismantled in the same way. And what remained after everything is exactly what you saw today, a structure that refuses to be forgotten. That alone should tell us something about what is worth building in our own lives, things that endure time and storms, works, relationships, knowledge. So now I ask you, which part of this story surprised you the most? Was it the seemingly impossible engineering, the calculated coldness of Imperial propaganda, the Hypogeum and its 2,000-year-old special effects, or perhaps the fact that all of it still resonates so deeply today? Leave it in the comments, because this conversation doesn't end here, and every response helps shape the next deep dives we'll take together into the history of Rome. If you want to continue on this journey, and there is so much more ahead, stories that will leave you speechless, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Every alert is an invitation for you to pause everything and dive back into Rome, because there are still emperors to discover, battles to relive, and secrets that time almost erased, and you won't want to miss any of them.